Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Foreigner Footy Files. I'm Natalia Pinkney, and this is episode 21, Down Under, round 2. Alrighty, we are hopping back in the Aussie folder, y'all. We have not gotten into it since right before the new year, and we're going to take a little break from the interviews, which I have been absolutely loving, by the way. I feel so privileged to have so many amazing young women coming on here to speak to me about their experiences, and trust me, there will be plenty more to come. So stay tuned in for those episodes. But now we're going to get back into the Australia folder, which the followers from day one are probably trying to hear the end of it by now. And yeah, we got to get through these files because we got 2 more years of Australia to talk about. So this folder has been a bit neglected, but yeah, it's time to tap back in. But as usual, before we get into that, a poem that is a piece from my path. This poem is titled Follow Your Dreams. When you take that leap and endure the feats, it's really something to make your heart skip a beat. The unknowns, doubts, and fears. With my dreams, all those things disappear. Because with dreams comes faith, and with faith is courage. The courage to keep all the things you want so dear, so near. For when things hit close to your heart and soul, the risk of losing it all can really take a toll. But that's the point, right? To trust and believe that the dreams are not just dreams. My reality is exactly what it seems. My dreams are just my future, played on preview mode in my mind, while I lay asleep and pause in time. But it's up to me to make them come to life, and hope is surely worth the price. Okie dokie. So last time we were down under talking about all the Australian shenanigans. I had just completed my first season with Logan, made Team of the Week, beating Mitchie's ass, and decided to stay at Logan for a second season. But ending on that high note in terms of football, I also had a big blow to the gut finding out that I did, in fact, have to leave Hotshot because my visa was up. And not up in terms of like my visa was over after 3 months, what I later found out, which is also something that kind of wish I knew more about before I got there. When you go to Australia on a working holiday visa, you can only work at one place at a time for, I think, 3 months. And then you got to find something new, which to me makes no sense at all because expecting somebody to find a new job every 3 months is kind of insane. But, I don't make the rules. I just do my best to follow them. So, with that being said, we filed for the application for extension for me to stay at Hotshot. It got denied. Your girl had to get the hell out before everybody got in trouble. So, I had to leave Hotshot. And, as usual, we love all those ups and downs. But picking back off where that ended, at the end of August in 2018, so let's do another year check in. So, it's 2018, end of August. And this is when I officially got the text from Jenna that my replacement is starting at Hotshot the next day. And I asked the question already knowing the answer, but I was like, does this mean that I'm officially being replaced at Hotshot? She's like, yeah, man, unfortunately, we try to hold out to the end of the week, but with not hearing anything positive back, we had to do what we had to do for the cafe, and we had to hire your replacement. And I mean, in reality, I can't do anything but respect that. It makes a lot of sense, and I wish that things were different, but you know, it is what it is. It's visas, it's business, it's life, and it was a punch to the gut. But don't you worry, it is not the last that you will hear of me at Hotshot. Now, let's get into September. In September, I applied for a sports visa because I be sporting, but also just for some stability for my future in long-term sense, because after my first season ending in Australia and Sean moving with me now and having all the friends that we have and having a routine, to me it just made a lot of sense for us to stay in Australia. And I knew that I wanted to hit the goal of playing in, which was then W League, which is now A League, to play professionally in Australia because it just felt like a good fit beach life, beautiful country, so much to see, amazing people that we've met along the way. And I just really saw myself staying there long term. So I figured, why not apply for the visa that'll allow me to do that and, focus on just being a footballer. But as usual with visas and bureaucracy, it is never as easy as it seems. It is never plain black and white of you play sports, you're here to play sports, you get paid to play sports, get the visa to play sports. Of course, that's not that's not how the system works, but we'll get into that a bit later. I applied for it in September. Now, let's skip a bit forward to October 18th. This was when it was confirmed on Logan's Facebook page that I would be returning for a second season. And I cannot explain how amazing that feeling was to get the notification that my current club has put out there publicly that they want me again for a second season. They put a really nice caption on it as well about me coming back for a second season and ending my first season so strong and being fast and scoring goals and just being a really good attribute to the team overall. And it was really nice to feel like my first club away from home really appreciated me and really wanted me to be a part of what they were doing moving forward. And so, yeah, it just really put something warm in my heart for Logan and for Australia and staying on the Gold Coast and just seeing where it would take me. So, yeah, October 18th, it was official. Your girl was staying down under for another season, round two. Now, the month of November, I couldn't really find too much in terms of old posts or text messages or things like that. I'm also trying not to go into every little itty bitty detail because 3 years is a long time to try and find something for every moment. But yeah, the main things that I saw were uh partied a lot with Milky. My season ended and we still trained. We still did some scrimmages here and there, but the official league games weren't happening for a moment. So yeah, we took advantage. I mean, we went out, we had some fun and enjoyed ourselves and really watched our friendship expand and just spent probably as much time together as we physically could outside of formally working together. Now that we didn't work together, we didn't see each other as much, which sucked, but we were still able to make it work. Now, since we're going to just like push past November, partying, having a good time, downtime away from some footy. December, I pulled off, well, not just me, it was a massive group effort. But in December, me along with my partner and a couple family members, my sisters, to be specific, because my parents and my brother were the ones that were on the opposite end of it, and a bunch of people from our best friend group from home. We pulled off one of the biggest and most successful surprises I've ever been a part of in my entire life. And we surprised my whole family with us coming home. So December 9th, Sean and I flew home and surprised my family. We even pulled off the double cross surprise on my little brother. So, quick story time within story time. Let's get into how this surprise was pulled off. All right, so season ends. My best friend from childhood was getting married in January. And I realized I had a large amount of time off from football before the season started. And for me, going from high school to club to university, it was really no off season. Like, obviously, I had some time away from football, but going from club to club, team to teams, different schools, I was almost always in season. So going from my season ending in August, September time, and then hitting October, November of still practicing and getting ready, but nothing crazy really going on. And then December, January is basically all preseason. So I'm like, that's a lot of time. And my best friend is getting married. So yeah, of course I'm going to head home for it. So we arranged to head home. And of course, we told my parents because my parents had help with the flights because flying literally across the entire planet is not cheap. Okay. So we're arranging it with my family. trying to figure out when we'll be home. Sean's talking to his mom and dad. I'm talking to my parents and my siblings. And we're all just trying to figure out when we'll see each other to get this visit on the road. And then Sean, my brother, and I had this idea to surprise my parents because this was the first time that I had really left home. I mean, I went to university in another state, but it was only like a 3-hour drive. So it wasn't really like leaving home. Plus, I was living in the same state as my two older sisters. So I wasn't really out of reach of family almost ever growing up. I mean, I was born in my neighborhood, not in my neighborhood. I was born in my area, stayed in my area all through high school, then went to college not that far away. And then after college, I was like, let me just hop across the world. So for my parents, this was a really big leap for them as well. So they had gone so long without seeing me. And with Sean joining me as well, his family also didn't see him either. So we thought, yeah, let's head home. We are arranging with my brother to surprise the family on December 12th, I believe it was. We then looked it up and I tried to figure out if it was possible for me to fly home in time to surprise my brother for his birthday, which is December 11th. So I'm like, okay, I really feel terrible that I'm missing my brother's birthday by a stupid day. So let's try and figure out if I can get home to surprise him as well. So my brother, Sean, and I, we're coordinating. We're trying to figure out how to surprise my parents, my grandparents, my aunts. And we're like, all right, cool. We got this plan on lock. Everybody's going to be surprised. Everybody going to get in on this. This is going to be a great time. We then set everything locked in with my brother. I was then able to find better tickets before my brother's birthday and then added him into the surprise. So we got our best friends and neighbors in on the operation. So our best friends from our friend group at home growing up, we were texting them like, yo, we're going to get picked up from the airport. We got to get us back to my neighborhood, but we can't be seen by my parents. But you also can't get seen by my parents because they'll wonder why you're around randomly. And we got to find a way to surprise them. So that is when my neighbor, who's the one that's getting married, that's who we messaged to say, okay, look, you're now in on this. We have to surprise my parents. We're going to come home and this is going to just be the best thing ever. So my best friend's parents are now in on it and we are going to surprise my parents first. So we set out on the 7th of December, I believe, to head home. And we end up having a layover just overnight, really quick in Shanghai. Shanghai is super cool, super busy. I have to say, I was really, really overwhelmed landing there. There's a lot going on in the airport. It's really just like hustle bustle, busy. They're trying to get you taxis to get you to hotels to get you into the city. And it's really hard to tell who's there to actually guide you and who's there to kind of scam you because, I mean, in any country, airports are like the top place for scamming, for taking advantage, pickpocketing, all those things because you have foreigners in a place where they have no idea what's going on. It's super overwhelming and they're not always on their P's and Q's. They're not always paying attention to what's going on. So landing in Shanghai, I just have to say thank God that I had Sean with me because I was just like, this is so much. Obviously, we don't speak the language. I just want to safely find a hotel because we even thought about just staying in the airport for the night just so that we could get to our flight on time in the morning. And then we realized, no, we have like an actual full night. We need to go sleep in a bed because we're going to be on another long ass flight the next day. So we go to the desk for help. And we're like, hey, we're foreigners and we need a place to stay and we need to find a way to get to a hotel. So they have like a group of people all standing in a corner that are connected to this shuttle service that are connected to hotels that just take you directly there. And then you can check in, get Wi-Fi, go on about your day. So we were like really trying to use our good people senses to figure out who was legit and who was a scam because there was just so many different taxi names and brands and then so many different hotel names being thrown at us. And you know, you've got these, it's also, we landed at nighttime. So it is dark out. It's the middle of the night. It's raining. And we're like, okay, this could end really bad if we get in the wrong van. You know what I'm saying? So we end up going to this one guy, and we saw a bunch of other foreigners going to him as well. So in our minds, we're thinking, if this ends bad, we're not alone. So we end up choosing this taxi service, and we get in the van, and they take us directly to a really nice hotel. So we get to the hotel, we check in, and I'm like, bro, we need to hop on Wi-Fi because I know for a fact my parents are freaking out that they have not been able to contact me for hours. Because what comes along with living overseas and never leaving your home and having a really close protective family is everybody got to check in at least once a day. And if you don't check in, sums up. And I had not checked in since we left Australia. So your girl was on the clock. I got onto Wi-Fi, and I shit you not, my mom was hitting my notifications, blowing me up. I'm trying to check into the hotel, give the lady at the front desk my information, trying to get all our stuff together out of the van, get to our room. And I'm like, she's going to ruin this damn surprise because she can't just take a breath. Like, I'm like, girl, just hold on for a minute. So we get into the room finally, we settle down, and I message my sister, and I'm like, bro, you got to make mom chill. Like, she cannot figure out that we are coming home right now. It's a surprise. And she's like, I know, I'm on damage control. I got you. So eventually we settle down, and we like position ourselves up against a wall that looks pretty neutral. So you can't really tell where we are. And we get on a call with my parents. And she's like, where are you? I haven't heard from you. What have you been doing? So I had to come up with some lie to tell her why she couldn't reach me for the last, I don't even know how long that flight was. And I'm like, yeah, all is good. So sorry. But we're fine. We're fine. Go to bed. We're cool. She's like, okay, thank you. So we check in with my mom. Check. Got the first day of travel out of the way. Fooled my mom. Time to go to sleep. Wake up and try to fool her all over again the next day. So I actually believe that I told her we would be out and about and would not be able to talk the next day. I'm pretty sure I covered my ass because there's no way that we would have gotten away with it any other way than that, because it was the extra long haul, because once we got on the plane and then got to America, we had no service. So we'll get to that. Anyway, so we wake up, get back to the hotel, get back to the airport in Shanghai, and take off for the second leg of our adventure. We then land in the States, and our besties picked us up, and we get in the car, and it was such an amazing emotional reunion. It was we had gone longer without seeing each other because we all went to college and we're all different ages slightly. So we'd gone more than, months without seeing each other, but it just felt different from being unreachable. We were across the planet. So it was like we could just drive to each other's universities and visit each other for a weekend. Like, nah, me and Sean were out. So landing back in there, getting picked up by our friends, and heading home to surprise the family was just so emotional and beautiful. And we looked a hot mess. We were so dog tired. We smelled horrible, but it didn't matter. We were back in the car with our friends heading back to our hometown. And this is where it gets super cool and interesting and very, very intricate. So we had to figure out what time my mom was going to be home from work, what time my dad was going to be home from work. And I had to remember which direction they would be coming into the neighborhood, because we have about 3 points of entry that you can enter my neighborhood from to get to my house. And so I'm trying to remember, okay, she'll probably come in from that side and she'll come around this time, and my dad will come home unless he's working from home because he's a computer engineer, so he can work from home as well. So I'm like, okay, we got to figure it out. So I am using my friend's phone to call my best friend's mom to be like, hey, look out your front window and tell me if my mom's car is in the driveway. She's like, no, it's not in the driveway. So we're checking in every 20 minutes, because I believe we flew into New York. So we had about a 2-hour drive home. So I'm checking in every 20 minutes. Is she home? Is she home? Do you see your car? She's like, no, but your dad's home. So we're like, shit, we have to find a way to get into my neighbor's house without my dad seeing us, without my dad seeing our friend's car as well. So we have the idea, my mom's not home yet. We're going to pull into the back of the neighborhood. And the way my neighbor's house is set up is the back side of her house leads into a cul-de-sac. So you go into the back part of our neighborhood, you drive around, and then you can loop into the cul-de-sac park. And then we sprinted through her backyard, crouching, trying not to get seen somehow, and enter her house through the back door. Now, we literally got into her house with maybe 15 minutes to spare before my mom gets home. So we get in her house. We also have our heartfelt hellos and I missed yous. and we're hugging and we're screaming and we're just like getting all the excitement out. And then we had to like get it together because we knew we still had to pull off surprising my mom, which that woman is always on it. So surprising her can be a bit tricky, but we did it. So we're standing in her living room and my mom's car pulls up and I'm like, all right. To my best friend's mom, I was like, go outside and tell her to come say hi to your dog, because after our family dog passed away, my mom then became insanely attached and close to our neighbor's dog, which she was close with anyway. But after we lost our dog, Harley really became her dog as well. So I was like, go tell her Harley wants to say hi and tell her to come over and see him, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. So my mom also just had shoulder surgery not long before this. So my mom's got a sling. Like she's just like going through it at the moment. So my neighbor goes out and she's like, hey, Angel, come over. Harley wants to say hi and I got to show you something or whatever. My mom's like, okay, girl. So she gets out of her car, doesn't even take her bags in the house, just comes straight over, because as soon as she mentioned seeing the dog, my mom was like, great, let me go see my baby. So they get out and they come into the house and we are standing off to the side. So when you walk into my best friend's house, it's like a long hallway that leads directly to the kitchen. And then if you go right, you hit to the dining room. If you hit left, you hit the living room. But it's behind a wall, so you can't see anything left or right until you get into the kitchen. So we're standing off to the left-hand side in the living room. And I'm just waiting behind the wall. And of course, it takes my mom a minute or two to get into the house because she's like talking to the dog and she's so excited. I'm getting antsy because I'm like, girl, if you don't get in here so I can surprise you. So she walks into the house and my heart is racing. My friend is videotaping from behind and me and Sean are just waiting to like pop out and surprise her. So she's walking in and she steps into the kitchen and I just step out from the side and I was like, hi, I'm home. And for those of you who know me, I was raised in the church, Baptist Christian, okay? My family don't cuss. My parents do not cuss. I know I be cussing on this podcast, but in my household, raised up, we don't cuss. My mom said hell, and for her, that's a cuss word. And my boyfriend and I were like, oh my God, she just cursed. And she was like, what the hell? And instead of hugging me, she ran back outside, which was probably the most perfect reaction of shock I've ever seen. I chase her outside naturally and I'm like, Mom, hi, I'm home. And she's like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here for a couple of days. I was like, I know, I'm surprising you. And so she's bawling. My mom just starts instantly crying, which understandably. So she starts crying and she's like, oh my God, we got to go tell your father. I'm like, I know, he's next on the list. We wanted to get you first. And she's like, oh my God, you guys were all in on it. I'm like, yes, Mom, this was an elaborate scheme, okay? We got to get Dad, but you can't keep screaming because he's going to come outside and you're going to ruin it early. So I'm walking her across the street to get to my house to surprise my dad. And she's just loud bawling, crying. And I'm like, Mom, like, please cry quietly because Dad's going to come outside and you're going to ruin it. And so she's literally like covering her mouth, trying not to cry too loudly and like exclaim that she's so excited. And we get, I shit you not, we don't even touch my front porch. We like on the path to get to the front porch. And my front door was like the inner door was open. So the screen door was just closed. And she screams, she's like, Milford. And so my dad comes from the kitchen and he steps into the front door and he's like, oh my God, and a look of shock on his face when he opened the door. And she's like, look, it's the kids. And I run in and I hug my dad. He starts crying. I start crying. We're all crying. Sean's hugging my parents. And my dad and my mom are standing there and they're like, wait, is this why you weren't answering your phone? I'm like, yes, this is why I wasn't answering the phone. I was in Shanghai. Like we were flying. I couldn't answer my phone. And they're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. So that was a really beautiful way to pull off the first leg of our surprises. Then we had to hit my aunt. So this was a bit easier because my aunt and my grandparents, I mean, my grandma's on social media a bit. My aunt kind of not so much, but it's easier for me to fool them because, I mean, I'll be calling my grandmother on her house phone, y'all, like old school. And my aunt, we'd be checking in once in a while. So it wasn't as hard to pull this one off, but they were still expecting us a few days later. So I drive 15, 20 minutes to get to my aunt's house. and I videotape everything. By the way, I have all these videos, so maybe eventually I'll release them. But um, I get to my aunt's house, I knock on the door, and surprise the shit out of her as well. And she starts crying, I'm crying, we hug, and I was like, surprise! And she's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Wow, this is literally everyone's reaction. Like, what are you doing here?" Um, but it was really beautiful. And then I head from my aunt to my grandparents, and I pull up. My aunt went first, actually. So she went to my grandparents, went to their house, and was like, "I'm just gonna go act like I'm trying to hang out." So she went to my grandparents' house, got there first, went in, trying to keep them all types of distracted, make sure everything feels absolutely normal. And then after about 10-15 minutes, I'll pull up, and they have a front door camera and they have a dog. So like sneaking up is not really an option, but they weren't expecting me, so I was still able to pull it off pretty well. So I walk up to the front door and I ring the doorbell, and my grandmother opens the door and she's speechless. And I was like, "Hey girl, surprise." So I open the door and I hug my grandmother. And my grandfather walks from the kitchen to the front door holding their dog, and he's like, "Natty?" And I'm like, "Hey, Poppy." And that was super cute to see them just absolutely floored. Like my grandparents were both just like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Hey, surprise." So yeah, I was able to surprise them as well. And that was absolutely beautiful. My aunt was in on the surprise to my grandparents then, because I got to her first. And so that was really, really cute. And then I headed back home, and directly from there, I drove, what was it, 6 hours? I don't know. It was a long ass drive. I forget. But I drove directly to Penn State to surprise my little brother in the double cross surprise. So, as y'all know, my brother was in on the original plan, double crossed him to surprise him for his birthday. So he's at his dorm expecting to be in on the surprise in 2 days. And he's like, "Hey, we're going to surprise the whole family." He's like, "I'm in on it. Let's go." Sean and I drive directly after long ass flights to surprise my brother. So we then had to get his best friend in on it. And so I'm texting his best friend. I'm like, "Hey, dude, we're on our way. We need you to open the side door to his dorm so that we can get in there so we can surprise him." And I was like, "But you also need to make sure to keep him in the room because we have to surprise him, blah, blah, blah." So it's right before winter break for everyone to go home for Christmas. So a lot of the kids have already gone home. Not a lot of people left on campus. So it wasn't super busy. So we had to try to like not stand out, which was kind of hard because the parking lots were bare. So we drive a long ass drive. We get to Penn State and we pull up, and his best friend is waiting outside to let us in, who was also a childhood neighbor of ours, which is kind of funny. So he lets us in, and we go to my brother's dorm room, and I knock on the door, and he opens the door, and he's like, "What the hell?" And I was like, "Double cross surprise." And he was at first super confused, and then super annoyed that I double crossed him, and then obviously super happy that we were home. But then, of course, being a younger sibling, went back to being annoyed that he was double crossed and was like, "Bro, I was supposed to be in on it." I was like, "Yeah, well, it's your birthday tomorrow and I got to see you." Or his birthday was in 2 days. And I was like, "I got to see you." So we double crossed him and got his surprise as well. And then, sure enough, we drove right back home from Penn State, like drove, I think, almost 6 hours and drove right back home. So, yeah, that was how we pulled off one of the most elaborate, multifaceted surprise home that I've ever done. Um, I do a couple more surprises on my trips around the world as I go. So you'll hear more of those. But this was the first one. And this was probably the best one because everyone was expecting me home, but not exactly then. And I got everybody. It was beautiful. It was a great surprise. So yeah, that is how I end back up in the States for winter break from after my first season in Australia. And we stay home for about 6 weeks, which is super crazy to me that the break was that long. But we stay home for about 6 weeks. And let me tell y'all, this break at home was wild. I mean, I thinking back on it before I even go back on my phone and look up the details of that trip home, I just remember parties, weddings, reunions, food, so much food, and packing it all into 6 weeks before heading back to Australia and getting back to business. So we will end this file in the Australian folder here with this beautiful, lovely family surprise. And we will pick back up next time, maybe talking about the Australian folder, maybe another interview. Can't promise anything. But when we do get back into the Australian folder, we will pick back up with the trip home, those 6 weeks, and then getting right back into business in Australia. So now, as usual, it's time for I Wish I Knew That. So I wish I knew more lawyers and legal systems before going to new countries. After everything that happened at Hotshot, having to leave, which felt so sudden because it became like a family to me there, and just wanting to have stability in the new country that I was in, and wanting to just play football and worry about the sport that I left home to do, realizing how much I didn't know. And then even still now, I'm in Germany, like 6 years later, and I'm still trying to figure out all these legal systems and the ins and out. And I just really wish that I knew more lawyers and legal systems before I went to these countries. That's luckily I'm ever learning. And so I'm really starting to get my, feet on the ground when it comes to getting information and staying prepared for things now. But yeah, I think if I would have had more information about the working holiday visa and how that system works and what was actually required for the sports visa in Australia, I think my first year going to my second year would have been completely different. And maybe I would have never even left Australia if I set myself up better in the first year. I mean, it definitely would have turned out different because the visas would have been done quicker, proper, probably granted. Um, don't want to give too much away before I get into the rest of Australia, but yeah, I just wish that I had more knowledge and more connections because I think it would have taken a completely different turn. That being said, probably wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm thankful for where I am at the moment and where I can see myself going in the future. So obviously everything happens for a reason, but yeah, those are things that I wish I knew because along with just having that information, the stress would have been less. And that's what we want, right? So yeah, I wish I knew that. And trust me on this one. Trust me, it's always good to visit home. If there's one thing that spontaneous, it wasn't even spontaneous, the well-planned trip home really taught me was when you are far from home, it really doesn't matter how long it is, especially if you know it's going to be longer term and more permanent possibly. Going home when you can is so important. And it doesn't always have to be for family. Sometimes you can go home and make sure you see friends first. Sometimes you can go home and, just make sure that you reconnect with a familiar place. Sometimes when we leave home, we lose connections with people, and that's fine. Um, but I think we also need to just realize that sometimes going back to familiar places is also really good for the soul. And it helps us recenter because when you're constantly in an unfamiliar place, you're constantly trying to maneuver between new land, languages, systems, trying to make it on your own. It's really stressful and it does a lot to you, especially when you're going for your dreams in the process of that. So when you have the opportunity, take it. Go home, see your loved ones, whether it's family, friends, dog, cat, just an old neighborhood you used to live in, whatever can recenter you in a space of feeling comfort and familiarity. Do it. Take that opportunity because home is special. And I can say in this long ass journey that I've taken, no matter how many new friends I make, new places that I can call home, I will always have that anchor of being able to go back to what feels like home, what feels special, what feels familiar and comfortable. And I mean, y'all have heard plenty of my stories now. It's not always a walk in the park and it's not always fun or easy. So when you have the ability to go back into a space where you are loved and supported and cared for, it really does help the rest of the journey go well. And it really does help you find yourself again in the midst of the chaos. So yeah, that's something that I definitely say y'all need to trust me on is always it's always good to go home. So book that flight if you've been debating it. Book it. It doesn't have to be a long trip either. I'm not saying go home forever or a month or anything long like that. It can be a quick 2 weeks, even 1 week if you really, really dread going home, but you just need to have some type of reset. Do it. It's worth it. All right, y'all. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of Foreigner Footy Files. You know what to do. Like, rate, review, follow on all the social platforms. We've got the public Instagram for the podcast, Foreigner Footy Files. You can request to follow me on my private Instagram. No promises that I will accept. And Pinky on Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, things you want to hear me talk about, follow-ups on episodes I've already done, you can hit me up in my DMs for the email of the podcast, foreignerfootyfiles@gmail.com. You can follow me on the TikTok page, Foreigner Footy Files. And if you want to listen, make sure you're checking us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course, the website itself for the podcast, which the link is on the public Instagram page, Foreigner Footy Files. So, yeah, that's it for this folder and file today. We got back into Aussie for a little bit and felt good. Felt good to reminisce a little bit. The interviews are great, and talking about topics that absolutely need to be talked about is, of course, what I'm here to do as well. But that was the whole point of starting this podcast, was to get into my journey. And it's also a nice little reminder to me of where I was and where I am now, and getting to reminisce about nice things like surprising family and seeing those that I love. It's just a nice reminder. So, yeah, thank you again, guys. Check back in 2 weeks and let's kick it together. Bye, y'all.